Hey, historians, we're at the NARRAMISSIC.
Yeah, 5 or 10 was
How do you pronounce it? NARRAMISSIC?
NARRAMISSIC.
NARRAMISSIC.
The first 30 years of the house's existence, this building here was the only one. This side of the wall didn't exist yet. And so for the first 30 years or so, this was the kitchen, the first entranceway. For as rustic as it looks, the Peabodys were among the wealthy settlers of Bridgton, coming from wealthy farming families in upstate Massachusetts. So the wealth of the family is expressed throughout the room. You see they've got their own bread oven, the pewterware of the Stevens family from the 1750s, the tea set of the family from the 1770s here. This is a complete tea set. Going back to some of these very early Queen Anne chairs here from the 1730s that they brought up from Massachusetts. And this chair in his father's house, which no longer exists, it was in those chairs around their table that they organized the first church in Bridgton. So that's always an artifact I point out.
Wow.
Connected with the founding of our first church.
That's got some energy to it. Wow.
1730s.
Wow, 1730s.
Here.
Oh, look at this.
The front parlor. We do not know what the Peabodys look like. These are portraits of their cousins, the Purleys, who lived the next hill over. There are typically samplers in here, which were done by some of the Peabody daughters and cousins, morbid little sayings on them. Behold our days, how fast they spend, how vain they are, how soon they end, that sort of thing. The one over there was done by one of the Ingalls girls. When greedy worms my body eat, here you may read my name complete. She was 9.
Wow. Now, what I find curious is the Ingalls and the first family, you said the Ingalls and the
Peabodys, yep.
Peabodys, that's both related to Salem. Peabody, Massachusetts used to be Salem Village. And
so they are descendants of that same family, yeah.
You hear that, historians? My YouTube channel, sorry.
Oh, no.
You hear that, historians? That's from a real historian as well. Yep. Yes, this house has got some lore, guys. Wow.
A few other Peabody things before we leave. This glass here, this is a German crystal tumbler. William, who built the house, his father, John, was a veteran of the Revolution, served at Bunker Hill, the first battle. Wow, This is said to be the glass from which he drank, having returned alive from Bunker Hill, for he didn't think he would have returned alive from there. So this is another important thing to show. We don't often take it out, but since you're here, giving it.
Oh, thank you so much.
A few other things. This is one of the Peabodys. This is their third daughter, Mary, who inhabits the house. She inherits. Because some of her sisters die or go out west. This is George Fitch, the man she married, and they have children here. A few other things from the Peabodys. This little cup, is this George? I never remember his name. Edward. So this is a cup that was purchased for Edward Peabody. He lived from 1808 to 1816. He died at 8 years old. And this was one of his mugs that has come down through the family, and we leave that out. Wow. So now the next room focuses on the Fitch family and the children of this couple here, George and Mary.
Wow, look at the doors. Oh, look at the handles. Look at the wood underneath the steps, guys. Look at oh, beautiful. Look at the, wow. That carpet looks pretty original.
Yes, this goes in around the time of the Civil War, maybe a little after.
How worn that is compared to the spots here.
So this room is set up to look more as it would look eve of the Civil War, 1830s, 1840s, 1850s. This is the period of the Fitch's occupancy. On the wall there we see Edwin Peabody Fitch, one of the children of George and Mary. Next to him is the girl he would later marry, Hannah Powers from down the lane. Edwin is the diary keeper, so he writes diaries and letters and journals all his life and puts it together at the end of his life into a book for his grandchildren, 90 Years of Living, which describes living in this house in the 1840s and 50s as a child. So on top of having so many of these artifacts, we're only the third owner here. The Peabody Fitches hold on to it from construction until the Great Depression, and then it is bought out of foreclosure by the town by a woman who preserves the interiors, and she wills it to us in 86. So about 90% of what you see in here was used by the family. And then we have Edwin's stories telling us oftentimes what they did with these things and the stories connected with them.
It's amazing.
Many of their books here, some of the school books from the early village library and schoolhouse are in this collection here. We've taken one of them to the museum, actually, but there are a few others here worth noting. This is one of my favorite books, Valuable Secrets. This is a bunch of early chemistry and cooking recipes that farmers might need to know. And of course our local papers, both Bridgton and Portland. From here, we go upstairs, although I don't know if I can get this door open this late in the year, it sticks. There we go. Coming
For
out
heat
here,
to go up. Regional heating.
Fitches were a political family. So in 1830, South Bridgeton becomes home to two movements, the temperance or anti-alcohol movement. Parson Fessenden was an anti-alcohol man. In fact, this barn, the Fitch's barn, was raised without the accompanying barrel of rum that would be provided at all barn raisings. It's a dry barn raising.
Oh, I didn't
And
know
then
that.
secondarily, the family were abolitionists or anti-slavery men, which you wouldn't think in the 1830s this far north was very big of an issue. We think of the North as being anti-slavery, but that is by the time of the Civil War. A generation earlier in the 1830s, rural agricultural communities, predominantly Democrat, 1830s Democrat Party position, slavery is a states' rights issue, not for Northerners to have an opinion on. There's a lot of more in-depth discussion there we could go into, but for the purposes of this, the Fitches were one of a small handful of people who did believe ardently that slavery was not only wrong, but it was a sin that they should be trying to stamp out throughout the country. They supported local organizations, newspapers, Garrison's Liberator, the magazine, sent money to Southern causes, and advocated for the Whigs and later the early Republican Party in the anti-slave trade, trying to promote literature that broke up the slave trade. That, of course, ends in the Civil War. And Edwin's the first person from Bridgeton to enlist in the Civil War. Also worth noting, Parson Fessenden, who preached in the church just down the way, turned out after the war, after his death, it came out he was a conductor on the Underground Railroad, and runaways were moving through South Bridgeton on their way to Canada. So upstairs is mostly bedrooms. If you'd like to go up, we can see them. I don't know how much time you have. I can also take you right this way into what we call the new kitchen. This is the addition that was put on when George marries Mary and they occupy the house. He builds for her this new kitchen, a bedroom, the keeping room, basically a giant pantry, and begins construction on the porch here. He lays the foundation. In 1856, however, this never gets built because he goes up into the wood to cut firewood. This house burns between 30 and 40 cord of wood a year, and he attempts to cut a deadfall, a dead standing tree. We call these widow makers, and that's what happened. It boat coming and it landed on him, and George died. They brought him down, they took him upstairs, he lived for about 3 days, and he died.
He passed away in the house?
Passed away in the house, yep. We believe there have been about 12 people die here, perhaps more. Most of the ones we can find record of are already children to teenagers or older, and we know there were infant mortality rates as well, and so there's probably more than 12.
And they held the funerals usually in the parlor, like Lizzie Bourne's and all them.
Lay them out, yes, and then take them to the South Bridgeton yard. On top of George, as well, we have other members of his family dying here. Edwin's brother Ansel goes to fight in the Civil War with Edwin. Edwin is made prisoner and taken down south, but Ansel is wounded. He comes home suffering from said wounds and does not survive his injuries. Sort of a long, prolonged, painful death. And he dies here as well. And then afterwards, Edwin is ransomed back from the war. He marries Hannah. They go out west to Dakota. And his aging mother and some of her daughters live on here in the next generation. His mother dies here, aged 90-something, in the 1890s. And then perhaps there were a few of that last generation who would have died here in the 20s, but mostly the family here in the 10s, 20s, 30s are the ones who lose it to bankruptcy. So most of the history is very early here. And then Miss Monroe used it as a summer home, so there hasn't been any births or deaths here in quite a while. Certainly at least a century.
So that was the original name for the house, is the Peabody House, as well as the farm that they were.
Yes, so this is actually a rendition of
Kind of like Peabody, but better.
This is the house down the lane that William's father built. And
really?
Of course, this burned down in the 30s. So this was the Peabody. This was also a Peabody house. It became known as Peabody Fitch because they only ever have daughters. So the name changes, but it's the same family. The name NARRAMISSIC is given to it by that woman who purchased it out of foreclosure that I mentioned, Miss Monroe. It's an Abenaki word. It's supposed to mean hard to find. But we're not sure if that's entirely accurate. But she's the one who names it that. Mostly just bedrooms upstairs.
Nice hearth. So that hearth with a cauldron.
If you feel you need to see it or would help with what you're going to do.
At least the room where he passed away would be kind of fun.
That's right up here.
Look at him smile. He was happy. You got to ask historians. Sometimes if they say no, that's fine, but at least you try. The ghost just did that. You hear the door slam?
We've got other rooms out here. But the room that probably interests you the most is this one. This is a small little nursery chamber. This is where the young children were. But we're also told this is
Heavy.
the room in which William Peabody spent the last years of his life bedridden.
Heavy in here.
Edwin remembers his grandfather as a very sickly old man. Edwin's 3 when he dies, so he only has a few memories of him. And then we believe this is also the room in which George was laid out after his accident. The family says that he made it back, collapsed in front of the woodshed. They get him in the house and get him upstairs. This being a free bedroom at that time, they have children. I don't imagine them carrying him through the house. This has always been where we believe George was laid, but I can't prove that.
Okay.
Another thing which you probably should see is Nancy Fitch, one of the later generations of Fitches.
Oh, this room's
This is the
connected.
master bedroom here.
All around.
Oh.
And Nancy Fitch was very possessive. This was her room when she lived here. She took her hat pin and etched her name in the window glass.
Oh, I can see it.
You can see Nancy Fitch Bridgton.
That's fun. Sarah Orne Jewett, America's first.
Yes.
She did that in her house in South Berwick.
Lots of local families did that.
Look at historians if you can see that. Wow, great knowledge, great house. There's a hearth or a fireplace in every room. Essentially, that was the heating. I mean, right?
Yes. So this house burns between 30 and 40 cord of
You
wood a
mentioned
year.
that. Wow,
It
that's
burns
a lot.
300 dozen candles.
These rocking chairs, there's quite a few. Was that like 1750? Or
This one's a little later. The one downstairs in the parlor, that came up with the family. One of the few things they brought on their sleigh in the dead of winter in 1786. That'd be John, William's father, to build their original house.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can definitely feel like the difference from like being in this room to this room here.
Do you feel that? And it's not because I walked up the stairs, but
Sure, yeah.
right now.
It's,
Right now,
you can tell the difference when you're going from room to room. It's a lot heavier.
this happens.
This is usually where we conclude the tour. Usually after the first day.
Yeah.
Before people pass out, that's an old chair. That's got to be 7. Look at that,
yeah.
Jim.
Yeah, we have a few other chairs and things in this
Jim
room,
Brown,
and in this
Team
house that
Paranormal
were
as
made
well.
in Bridgton,
Shows it.
but those are in storage right now. Wow. Most of the things here either come from the family or we don't know their provenance. Probably locally made.
We're going to go live on the podcast. Thanks for watching, guys.